By now, you've probably heard about a project called Gen1 Recomp, and I myself have checked it out. I wanted to make a video today because, actually, there's some misinformation spreading online, and I feel like it's quite important to try and tackle that since this is sort of adjacent to my niche. If you're new here, greetings! I'm Mr. Poryman, and I do Gen1 romhacking. And today's video isn't about romhacking, but it is going to come up. So, Gen1 Recomp. Before anything else, I want to talk about what it isn't. Firstly, it isn't a recomp. Actually, let's just take a look at that for a second, because what would that even mean? Recomp would seem to suggest the opposite of decomp, which is short for decompile or decompilation. And in the romhacking community, we are very familiar with the concept of decompilation. Gen1 romhackers typically work with the PokeRed disassembly to modify the game. The disassembly is the original game exploded out into thousands of files, with lots of handy comments and human-readable labels. Another name for this is a decompilation. If I were to take the disassembly and load it into my WSL here and type the word make, the files are recompiled back into the original ROM. The result is the exact same game that came on the cartridge all those years ago, down to the byte. When we modify the game, we make changes to some of the code and then follow the same process, building a ROM from the files, or in other words, recompiling it. And we end up with a new version of the game, but it's still a ROM for the Game Boy. Gen1 Recomp isn't this. It's something different, and we'll come to that. Gen1 Recomp also isn't an emulator of some kind, and doesn't claim to be. In fact, on the GitHub page, it is clearly stated that this project does not include a ROM, emulate the Game Boy, transpile assembly, or download a disassembly. Transpile assembly? What's that? Well, the original game is written in assembly code, and that is the same code we work with when ROM hacking. So when they say it doesn't transpile assembly, they're basically saying it doesn't actually read any assembly code. Gen1 Recomp is not an assembly-based project, and does not put the assembly code through some kind of converter when running. So what is Gen1 Recomp? Well, it's a port. It's not dissimilar from when a game on one console gets ported to another console, like when Toy Story on the Mega Drive came to PC. This particular port is written in Lua, and uses something called the Love2D engine. When you first boot up the program, you'll be asked to load in an unmodified Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow ROM before you're able to play the game. And I think this may have slightly fueled a misconception that this is actually somehow running the original game. In reality, the entire game has already been rewritten in Lua code, and all that it's doing in this process is grabbing some assets from your original ROM. So when you play Gen1 Recomp, what you aren't doing is playing the original game, and what you are doing is playing something like a fan-created remake. Basically, it's a fan game. Does this matter? Is this a negative thing? Well, not really. I think it's fine. Pretty cool, actually. But it's probably never going to be a one-to-one recreation of the game, and I don't think that's necessarily even the goal here. That means it could probably never be used for something like Gen1 speedruns or anything like that, and should be considered a totally separate, new version of the game. And to be honest, it's pretty impressive. I had a little go, and I even added in a mod for 3D voxel support, which is what I think most people are going to want to do, and it's alright. I'm a bit of a purist, and for me, the voxel novelty kind of wore off after about 5 minutes, and I don't really see myself carrying on and stacking it out with hundreds of mods. But that's completely besides the point. Each to their own, you do you. As I make this video, the game is pretty buggy, although I'm sure that will improve rapidly. I was quite impressed that I was able to load in an actual Pokemon Red save file from the Game Boy. This seems to get converted to a format that the Lua system likes, so it's not natively saving and loading with the Game Boy format, but it does work, and there's even an export function to get a Game Boy save file back out from it. Sadly, this part didn't work for me, but I'm sure they'll get that fixed in no time. Now, I'm sure some of you want me to talk about the other thing, and okay, we can talk about that a little bit, because yes, the creator of this has openly admitted to using an LLM to assist in the coding process, but does deny that this is the result of vibe coding. I don't really want to speculate about somebody else's workflow, but what is clear is that mods for the game are being created at an immense speed, and some of those are almost certainly going to be vibe coded. I suggest you do your own research on these things and consult your own moral compass. I do have some concerns about what this might mean for ROM hacks. Some players are asking for Gen1 Recomp support for their favourite ROM hacks, and who can blame them? That might seem like the natural progression. But well, a lot of ROM hacks sit in public repositories on GitHub. In other words, they are open source. If somebody wanted to, they could probably download the entire contents of such a repository, feed it to Claude, and ask for a Gen1 Recomp compatible mod. Is that a good thing? I sincerely hope not. It is my hope that some kind of policy materializes. It is my hope that some kind of policy materializes around. This is really hard to say. Materializes around this topic, as we really should be asking people first. Of course, if a creator gives their consent, then that is completely different, but personally I wouldn't consent to it, particularly when it may involve putting thousands of hours of my work through an LLM to create an imitation of it. It's not my intention to knock the project or anything, and these kinds of concerns exist with or without Gen1 Recomp. It's sort of just put a spotlight on how even the ROM hacking community isn't safe from bad actors with subscriptions to Claude. The repository for Ghostlock is currently private, but it has always been my intention to make it public when the game is complete. The way things are going, I'm not so sure anymore. As I've alluded to, some people are under the illusion that Gen1 Recomp actually runs Game Boy games and enhances them somehow, but as mentioned before, that's not what it's doing at all. That would actually be really cool. Such a system could in theory read in any ROM hack and add 3D voxel support by emulating the Game Boy in a new novel way, and I would personally be a lot more excited for a project like that. Fancy emulators, yes. New fancy versions of ROM hacks without consent, not so much. Just to finish off, regarding the potential for misconceptions, the creator of the program has written a clear explanation of what it is on GitHub. The project name is quite frankly misleading, and I would like to see it changed. Additionally, I am not infallible and I may not be 100% correct on some of the finer details, but I have done my due diligence to try and correctly convey what this project is, as well as a few of my takes. I've put sources in the doobly-doo and would ask that if you have information that contradicts anything I've said, that you also include your sources in a comment. Also, please don't go and be mean to anyone involved in the project, that's really not what this is about. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. I'd like to wish you a wonderful day, and I look forward to welcoming you back to another video soon. For now, bye!